Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts.
Listen, you do you. Fuck everyone else thinks. Because at the end of the day, when my head was gone with psychosis, when I was in jail doing a sentence, or even when I was really battling mental health, with suicidal thoughts, everyone loved saying that. Everyone was saying, fuck it, his head's gone, he'll never come back. Listen, he's in jail, or listen, he probably on the top of himself. It's madness. That's when, like, you know when your proper friends are as well, because when you start doing well, people, when you're bad, people used to give you advice, listen, you need to do that, that and that. But when you start doing well, you hate saying that. As even when you use our 1126, whatever it is, they're the one writing comments about you, because you're already doing something they can't really dream of. They love seeing you when you're down, but when you're doing well, they hate it. That's when you get the criticism, that's when you get people trying to critique what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, you're already doing something they can really dream of. So never let that knock you down. Never let someone's input on you take you down. Because you're already going to some place they can really dream of.
So that was the voice of Jamie Griffin, who is somebody who seems to have completely turned his life around, or certainly is attempting to. Every day, I'm sure, is, another day to get through. Living on the right side of the law for him is a plus. But he's a guy with a kind of a past that linked him into the Kinahan Hutch feud. He certainly carried out a fair share of violence in his day. He was going down a particular road. The incident that he was in court for this week happened during a time before he sort of had decided to take hold of his life and change the course of it. And he's good story of redemption, isn't he? And
yeah, I think so. Like, he was back in the Sunday World as well as all the other newspapers, because he was in the circuit court in relation to an assault that occurred in a pub. It was back in 2019. It seemed to have been an assault really out of no great planning in it.
Yeah.
Two men, Jamie Griffin was one of two men. Another man, Tommy Dorn, was also convicted of it. Somebody bumped into somebody in a pub. Violence escalated. Jamie Griffin certainly became involved. The man was hit in the head with a chair. And, the whole incident, it was described as lasting just 1 minute. Sort of not notable, I suppose. These things are in the papers every day, these sort of common or garden assaults, I suppose.
cocaine and alcohol involved. And
yeah. So, but the interesting bit, I suppose, is Jamie Griffin's history, and then again, his most recent history as well. Jamie Griffin was one of these guys who was being, I suppose, he was being described as one of the young guns associated with the Kinahan Cartel. Even back to the days of Bebo, his name was one of those that was being put up by rival factions associated with, the Byrne organised crime group, I suppose, as we come to know it now. Jamie Griffin was being put forward as one of these. There was, I suppose, a reckless group that had associated with people like Freddie Thompson and Liam Byrne. Young guys who were working as drivers and in other parts of that business. When the Kinahan Hutch feud kicked off, they obviously allied with the Kinahan side. And Jamie Griffin, even though he was a very young man, he's only 29 now, even as a teenager and into his early 20s, was one of those people who had earned this reputation as a person who was to be feared on the streets of Dublin. Mm-hmm. I mean, genuinely feared. A big, strong guy. People will see the pictures of him there. Very connected with people in the higher end of the Kinahan Cartel, such as Liam Bob Rowe, who's passed away recently. He was living in the South Inner City, and there certainly was an aura of fear. Served, I think it says he has, 40 convictions at this stage.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in and out of prison during that time. Was also notoriously suspected of being involved in particularly violent incident during the feud. 2 violent incidents in the prison. He also had that reputation in the prison as somebody who was very much out of control and
those
to be feared.
One was a knife attack on
one was
Derek Delboy Hutch.
Exactly. There was one he was never convicted of it, but he was.
He was disciplined over that, I think.
He was
in prison.
disciplined, yeah. So there was a knife attack on Delboy Hutch.
That was after Gary Hutch had been murdered in Spain.
Yeah, it was in 2015 when the feud was really about to kick off. Delboy Hutch was set upon in prison by Jamie Griffin and another man who very close to him. There was a knife attack. He ultimately managed to sort of fight them off and not become too damaged. And that had followed on from an attack a year earlier on Wayne Bradley. In 2014, Wayne Bradley had also been attacked in prison, and Jamie Griffin was also being linked to that. Again, never received a conviction. So those two people that are subjected to those attacks are obviously people that are very infamous names in gangland history. So I suppose it shows you what what level Jamie Griffin was regarded as and how he was regarded. He also, some of his associates would have been very linked in with the Graham DeWitt Whelan at that stage. These were young guys. They would have been linked to murders, even though Jamie Griffin wouldn't have been, in particular the murder of Declan O'Reilly in 2012. So a very feared guy.
And so what sort of, what has he given a reason for? Was there something that made him decide to turn it around, or?
Well, he seems to have come out of, I mean, look, you can listen to him.
Yeah.
Because, in fact, there was a story, I was looking back at some of the old stories when he was being released, I think it was in 2017 or 18, and there were stories in the paper about Gardaí on high alert for Jamie Griffin to be released. So he was regarded as being of that level. But then, obviously, he was been in and out of prison, and he's come out now, and the reason his name jumped out at me again is because I've seen him on social media. So he's become a kind of a social media influencer to an extent, a very overused term. But he has spoken over the last couple of years, certainly over the last year, about the mental health struggles he went through, the violence he inflicted. He's spoken about, how he's trying to put his life together. He's become a personal trainer. Really, I suppose we've got used to seeing guys, I suppose some of them in the UK, ex-criminals, and it's quite... they do a lot of social media, but a lot of it is bragging and slagging people off
calling
and
people
all of
out
that.
and all that.
Yeah.
Whereas this is really sort of...
This is a different sort of level of honesty. He's speaking about very directly about regrets, also about not letting these things define him.
And he's still only a young man. He's only about 30?
Well, he's only at 29 years old.
Right.
And it may well be the case that there are other things from his...
into a new decade.
Well, it may well be the case that he has other things working out from his past. This one is from 2019. But yeah, like it's an interesting story because you can see at this guy, and he speaks about it himself from the age of 13, 14, becoming a heavy drug user and being associated with all that life. And by the age of 18, 19, being so heavily embedded in that life that, it's not, the decisions you make at the age of 17, 18, 19. I mean, I don't think anybody will want them to be hanging over your head for the rest of your life. You don't have a clue. I mean, you just don't. So but
it's like, it's hard to get out of all that.
It's hard to get...
Very hard to get out of it. There is ways though, isn't there, when you see somebody like him who is so embedded and deeply...
Yeah, I mean, that is the only...
Headed on a certain, trajectory, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I mean,
it's not impossible to get out. There is ways, and he's probably a beacon of that.
Well, he's a beacon of hope, and maybe people will be cynical seeing him come before the courts, and maybe if he was to come again. But it's an interesting tale that he tells for sure, and he tells it. You can tell it's with sincerity. Now, people have feet of clay, and if you put yourself up, maybe, but the reality is that he speaks about mental health struggles, and that is another interesting bit that you don't always hear from people that have become involved in that life. And I think he speaks about the absolute strain that it put him under in a number of ways. He speaks about suffering, sort of drug-induced mental health psychosis.
Yeah.
Also being on, abusing drugs, obviously, and, battling with suicidal thoughts. And it's an interesting perspective to see how somebody goes. And, it's an interesting life tale. I mean, social media, I suppose, doesn't tell you everything, but there are a lot of people.
Well, he's been given a suspended sentence in relation to that assault, and the reason being the judge.
Well, the reason being that the judge recognises his
this,
ability to rehabilitate, and also, I suppose, given the nature of the assault, while certainly that the man has suffered a very serious attack, it lacks premeditation and on all of those things. And he's spoken about it in his latest TikTok, saying he's very grateful, and he expected to go to prison and he didn't. So
I'll have to give him a follow.
You have to give him a
sold
follow.
Him to me now.
Well, look, it's I suppose for us that do write about crime and do crime podcasts, where do you, it's a constant interesting line for us, isn't it? Because, somebody that gets involved in criminality at a young age and has, maybe had no choice, or that's the life that was presented in front of them. What leeway do you give them? Jamie Griffin speaks openly about the bad things he did, and there will be a victim on the other side of that that we haven't heard from. They may think that apology is too little too late. I mean, I don't know that, but they may think that. But, and also then if people have this criminal past, have that, if you Google his name, the stuff will come up about the Kinahan Cartel. What chance should people be given a chance to go past that? And I mean, I think most fair-minded people would say they should be. But, then again, none of
Some
us...
of them would say the media drag them back all the time.
You might say that.
Yeah.
And, those are arguments that can be made. I mean, we also, we stand behind what we do, and people can Google us and have a go with us. But I mean, what I mean is that it's an interesting line, because there is no clear answer to that. But the answer has to be at some point that people, if they do make an effort at changing their lives, they should be encouraged, because
I always think it's also so fascinating, and it's such a worthwhile thing to listen to somebody like that.
Yeah.
Who is articulate enough to be able to explain, what they were doing, how they were thinking at the time, what were the forces that were keeping them in that world and maybe directing them in that world, and etc., how they got in. That's where you learn. But you have to speak to people who are in it. Like, there's no point in constantly skirting the edges of it and only talking to people involved in law enforcement, which is one aspect of, crime.
Of course.
But, when to get a story from somebody who's been in there, in gangland or the underworld or whatever we'll call it, from them to come out and be able to tell you firsthand, you get a kind of a ringside seat into a world that you never can imagine.
No.
Because it's so far away from most people's norms.
Well, it is, and the reality is it's certainly so far away from our norms, but there are a group of people, the circumstances that they grow up with, it isn't far from their norms at a very early age. Look, you can only, rehabilitation is an essential part of our criminal justice system, and we do sometimes, us no doubt, like everybody else, can sometimes feel really shocked to see people get suspended sentences. But I suppose when you hear somebody explain it from their context, you have to say there has to be a value in that as well at some point. And look, he may, let's hope that he lives up to his expectations, but he certainly is an honest and sincere person in his words at the very least.
Interesting. Okay, Niall, thanks a million.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.